last episode was about the bivouac time that I spent at the Parker Street shelter in Boston. And I left there because I happened to make a phone call just on the spur of the moment to my mother, who was living in California. And I just spontaneously proposed that I come out and stay with her for an unknown amount of time. And she said yes. So knowing that Irving was interested in my plans for going places, since he asked me about going to Chicago, he walked by when I got off the phone, and I said to him, I'm going to stay with my mom in California, which I think he was interested in hearing. So I told him that. And then, so then I went out to California and really had no plans for the future. I didn't plan on going to Chicago. I just had, my interest had been raised at the moment that he asked me about that in Irving. But I didn't think about it any further. So I went out to California, stayed with my mother. It didn't go very well. And she died of brain cancer after I was there for 6 months. And I went to San Diego, stayed in San Diego for a while. While I was in San Diego, I had bought a bicycle with the money that I had saved up from Social Security. And it was a very good bicycle. It was a Nishiki. I think it was about a 15 speed, something like that. And I was doing some riding around San Diego, and I was actually in the suburbs. I was in Santee. And one day I took a bike ride, and I had a flat tire, so I was walking back. It wasn't too far. I was walking back home. And I was walking down this open road. It was coming down a hill. There was a hill behind me. And I was walking my bicycle beside me. So I looked up down the road, and coming towards me was another bicyclist. And I realized that he was riding a very elaborate bicycle that had a windshield along the whole bike in the front. I had never seen a bike like that. I sort of knew they existed, but I'd never seen one. So I noticed that this was an unusual bicycle, and he was coming toward me. So I decided to do something with that moment. I had been walking around various places, homeless, and when I was in New Haven, I happened upon the thought of doing something. Because I was just by myself. I had no property with me. I was just walking around. I put my hands out like this, outstretched to either side, and my feet I outstretched. And then I looked down at one hand and then at the other, and I realized that this was my head and my two hands and my feet were forming like a star, like when you make snow when you make angels in the snow in the wintertime. You do this, then you move your arms back and forth, your feet back and forth. And it occurred to me that there's a certain mathematical proportion between the sides of a pentagon, which the stars enclosed by pentagon. And I thought, well, maybe there's some mathematical significance in that. So as I do this in public, I'm leaving a sign of some sort. It didn't occur to me that it was of very much significance. It's not, sort of. And I did that a couple times in New Haven. And then, so I thought I would do this for this in front of this bicyclist. And so I put myself into that position. I looked then at one hand on the left, and he was coming up, of course, on my right. I was on the proper side for pedestrians to walk on. And then as I turned to look at my right hand, he went right by me at that moment. And at the moment that he was doing that, two things happened. One, I smiled at him, and he smiled back. That's one thing. And the other thing that happened was that down the road, coming up, there were several cars coming up at some distance, but the first car coming swerved immediately into the other line of lane of traffic, oncoming traffic. There were no oncoming cars, but it was the other lane. Swerved out into the other lane and then across the road, or straight across the road, and then straight back across the road into his lane, and then off onto the shoulder. Then the occupants of the car got out of the car and lined up along the road. There were three of them: a man, a woman, and a young girl. And they lined up along the side of the road. As I was doing this with the bicyclist, I was leaving this sign. And the bicyclist smiled. He was really thrilled, apparently, about what I was doing. I was leaving a sign for him that I knew what he was doing. You know, I had these cycling experiences, and I could appreciate very well what kind of trip he was on. He might be on a multi-thousand-mile trip on a solo venture, and I was announcing pretty much that I was conscious of something going on at that moment, so that it was important to him, and I was giving him something to focus on visually to help him orient himself, something to make him a little bit more stable, perhaps something that he could relate to in terms of another cyclist, maybe, or another person who's conscious of him, and help him out. So I think that the man who was driving that car, who swerved that way, recognized what I was doing, and immediately decided to do something in response to that, and that was why he pulled out and pulled back in and pulled to the side. They got out, they lined up, they waited there while I began walking again, and walked past them, and they were maybe 100 feet down the road. So all that time that I was walking, they were just standing there, perfectly motionless. And when I got up to them, they didn't say boo. I didn't say boo. I was beside myself as to how to behave, and so I behaved very, very gruffly. I had a very serious demeanor on my face because I had done something that was I thought very significant, and I wanted to act in a way that was consistent with that. So I acted very very somberly, and they had very serious expressions on their faces, and they just stood there and they watched me while I walked by, and I continued to walk on by, and then I walked home. Unusual experience. So I call that a legend, and I think from that moment on I consider myself to be a bicycling legend. You can think of me as a king or not. I haven't even explained that part of it yet, but I think to that point is an argument that a certain legend exists, and that those people certainly who lined up by the side of the road keep in their minds and memories that experience as a remarkable experience, and although it wasn't so demanding on me, it was certainly a very exciting experience for them, and I hope that eventually they get news that I have been successful after that point, and have really benefited from realizing that somebody is interested in that kind of thing that I go through. Unusual things that I go through. And I joined a website called bikeforums.net, and I created a thread there in their forum called Legend, and I discussed this. I discussed some of the other things that I've talked about in these talks, and it was interesting to get feedback from other members of the site. A lot of them very critical, a lot of them very, very antagonistic, and I tried to do my best to answer each one. So that's what happened in Santee, in the San Diego area, and then I had a little falling out with my landlord, and I decided to leave, so I got on a plane with my bicycle, went back to Boston, just because that's the only place I could think of to go to. And I stayed in Boston for a couple weeks, but then I left. I went back, got on a bus, and went back to Chicago to see if, I called my brother and asked him if he would take me back in, and he said yes. So I went back and I stayed with him. And I applied to graduate school at IIT because I thought, maybe because I can draw now, maybe this is the time for me to try again to get into the architecture profession. So I applied to the Illinois Institute of Technology Architecture Department, their master's degree program. They have a 3.5, at the time it was a 3.5-year program for a master's for the first professional degree, people who had a different major for their undergraduate degree than architecture. Of course, I had one in physics and one in economics, but not architecture. So I applied there and I got in. So I moved all my stuff to the dormitory at IIT, and I began my studies. My first year was uneventful. My second year was tremendous. I did a lot of great work, and I used my logistics to do it, and nobody knew that. I also used a code that I had invented when I was first in Santa Cruz in 1981. I used the public library there to do a little bit of work, and that was before my real significant work in logistics. But I did happen to think of a way to encode English into binary that was a natural way, and not the way that I had ever heard of anyone doing. And I used that in architecture school to make notes to myself, and one of my teachers said that it was something I should put into my designs. So I did. I put it into my designs. I made descriptive signs for what I was doing in my work in code, and it was interesting. So, and I became known as the person with his own language. They thought it was my own language, but it wasn't. It was just English. And my third year was uneventful, so I had a good year in between two bad years. And for some reason in my third year, the financial aid office made a mistake, and I wasn't able to finish my degree. I have now a large debt, but effectively I don't worry about it because I'm just beyond it. Maybe somebody will pay it back, I don't know. So they made a mistake. I wasn't able to finish my final semester. I had to drop out of school, and I took up an apartment. I got an apartment. I worked for a while. I lost my job, but the things that happened in the apartment I think I'll cover in the next episode. That's my plan anyway, so I'll do that and bring this episode to a close.